Snow fell the way it used to fall, when the world still felt honest. Slow at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself were growing tired. By nightfall, the blizzard had swallowed the mountains whole, burying roads, trees, and memories beneath thick white silence. At the edge of that silence stood a small log cabin, its porch light flickering against the wind. Smoke crawled weakly from the chimney, bending sideways as the storm pressed in. Inside, Elias Carter sat alone by the fire, wrapped in a fraying army blanket that still smelled faintly of cedar and old wool. He was 78 now. His hands shook when he lifted his mug, not from fear, but from the cold that had learned the shape of his bones. This cabin had been built by his father. He had repaired it after the war. He had buried his wife behind it, under the tallest pine, the one she loved most. Everything that mattered to him stood within a few acres of frozen ground, and Elias had no intention of leaving it. The knock came hard, too hard. Elias frowned. No neighbor would risk the mountain road. In weather like this, he rose slowly, joints protesting, and reached for the door. When he opened it, the wind rushed in, followed by 3 men who did not belong to winter. Their boots were clean, their coats were thin, their eyes were sharp. They spoke quickly, rehearsed words spilling out about land values, permits, progress. One of them held papers that fluttered uselessly in the wind. Elias listened quietly, then shook his head. "This land isn't for sale," he said, voice calm but firm. The tallest man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Old man, everything's for sale." Elias stood straighter. "Not this." The shove came without warning. He hit the porch hard. Breath knocked from his chest. Snow soaked through his clothes instantly. Someone kicked his ribs. Another laughed. Papers scattered like dead birds. When they left, the storm swallowed their footsteps. Elias lay staring at the falling snow, each breath burning. It took him long minutes to crawl back inside. He collapsed by the hearth, blood staining the white rug his wife had woven decades earlier. He didn't scream. He didn't call for help. Men like Elias Carter rarely did. Miles away, red and blue lights cut weakly through the storm as Officer Daniel Carter drove, with both hands tight on the wheel. Snow hammered the windshield. The radio crackled with reports of blocked roads and stalled vehicles. Officially, he should have turned back. In the rear of the patrol SUV, Rex, his German Shepherd K9 partner, lifted his head and let out a low whine. His ears were rigid, nose pressed close to the metal grate. He smelled something wrong, long before Daniel felt it. Daniel hadn't planned on going home. The city needed him. The job always did. But all evening, something had tugged at him, an ache beneath the ribs, the kind that came with unfinished things. He thought of his father, alone in the mountains, thought of the way Elias had stood straighter than any man Daniel knew, even when age bent his spine. Without announcing it to anyone, Daniel turned off the highway. The mountain road was nearly gone, buried beneath drifting snow. Twice, the SUV slid dangerously close to the ravine. Rex braced himself, eyes locked forward, as if guiding them by instinct alone. When the cabin finally appeared, through the white haze, Daniel's chest tightened. The porch was splintered, the door hung crooked, and there, dark against the snow, was blood. Daniel burst inside, gun raised. The fire had nearly died. His father lay on the floor, barely conscious. "Dad!" Daniel whispered, dropping to his knees. Elias opened his eyes slowly. "Took you long enough," he rasped, trying to smile. Rage flooded Daniel, hot, shaking, focused. Rex moved instantly, standing guard, body between Elias and the open door. An ambulance couldn't reach them. Daniel cleaned his father's wounds with shaking hands, listening as Elias explained between labored breaths. 3 men, papers, threats. "They'll come back," Elias said. "Storm makes cowards bold," Rex growled softly. As if agreeing, they came back. Just before dawn, Headlights pierced the snow again. This time, the men expected silence, weakness, surrender. Instead, the door opened to reveal a uniform. The leader froze. "Well, I'll be—"
"Step back,"
Daniel ordered. "Weapon steady. Now." The wind howled around them, snow whipping sideways. Rex stood at Daniel's heel, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the men, with focused intelligence that made even the bravest hesitate. "You don't know who you're dealing with," one of them sneered. Daniel's voice was ice cold. "I know exactly who you are." The tallest man lunged toward Elias, who stood trembling but defiant in the doorway. Rex moved faster than thought. At Daniel's command, the K9 launched himself forward, knocking the man into the snow with controlled force. Another swung a metal bar, striking Daniel's shoulder. Pain flared, but Daniel didn't fall. He shielded his father, grit and training holding him upright. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, backup fighting the storm. Trapped, exposed, the men tried to flee. Snow betrayed every step. Rex held his position, teeth bared, until cuffs snapped shut, and justice stood shivering in the white dawn. Elias watched it all, tears freezing on his cheeks. Not from pain, but from pride. The storm passed. 2 days later, sunlight glinted off untouched snow, turning the world quiet and clean again. Elias recovered slowly, wrapped in blankets, watched over by his son and a loyal dog who never left his side. Legal protections followed. The land was secured. The men were charged. Daniel requested a transfer, closer to home. Each morning, Elias sat on the porch, with Rex at his feet, listening to the wind move through the pines. The world hadn't forgotten him, after all. And in the stillness after the storm, justice didn't feel loud. It felt right. The quiet that followed was deeper than silence. It was the kind that only comes after something terrible has passed through and left its mark behind. Elias had survived the war. He had survived loss. But lying in that cabin afterward, listening to the soft creak of timber and the distant crack of thawing ice, he realized how close he had come to being erased, not by time, but by men who saw age as weakness. Daniel stayed longer than he planned. At first, he told himself it was practical. The roads were still unstable. His father needed care. Rex needed rest after the strain. But as days turned into a week, Daniel understood the truth. He had been avoiding for years. He had been gone too long. Every morning, Daniel shoveled the porch while Rex patrolled the perimeter, nose to the snow, reading stories written by animals. And wind, Elias watched from a chair near the window, coffee warming his hands, his gaze following his son with quiet gratitude. "You always did your chores slow," Elias said one morning. Daniel smiled faintly. "You always said, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right." Elias nodded. "Guess I did something right. After all." They spoke more than they had in years. Not about the attack, not much, but about Daniel's childhood, about the war stories Elias had never told, about the things men say only when they know time is precious. One afternoon, a pickup truck struggled up the road. A woman stepped out, bundled in a thick coat, carrying a casserole dish and a folded American flag. Word had spread. Neighbors came quietly, respectfully. Some brought food, some brought firewood. One old man removed his hat and stood silently on the porch for a long moment before saying, "Thank you for your service." To Elias, voice breaking. Elias had never liked attention, but this felt different. This felt earned. Rex became something of a legend. Children from town sent drawings. One little boy mailed a card that read, "Thank you for saving the grandpa." Daniel taped it to the refrigerator. At night, when the wind rattled the windows, Rex slept by Elias's bed. Not because he was told to, but because loyalty doesn't require orders. Daniel's shoulder healed. His father's bruises faded. But something else changed. Something deeper. Elias no longer sat with his back to the door. Daniel no longer looked at his phone. When his father spoke, on Sunday morning, Elias insisted they attend the small church down the mountain. Daniel hadn't been in years. Rex stayed outside, lying patiently in the snow, watching. The hymns were old, the voices were thin, but the words filled the space between them, like warmth. After the service, the pastor placed a hand on Elias's shoulder. "You're not forgotten," he said simply. Elias swallowed hard. Weeks later, Daniel received official approval for his transfer. The city would lose a good officer. The mountains would gain something back. On Daniel's first official day, stationed near home, he stood on the porch with his father, watching the sun rise over snow-covered trees. Rex sat between them, breath steaming, eyes calm. "You staying this time?" Elias asked. Daniel looked at the cabin, the land, the man who had taught him what justice really meant. "Yes," he said, "I am." The wind moved gently through the pines, carrying with it the promise that some things, faith, family, loyalty, could still stand strong against the coldest storms. And in that quiet, snowy place, the past and the future finally rested side by side. The winter loosened its grip slowly, the way it always had in the mountains, reluctant, careful, as if the land itself needed time to trust warmth again. By early March, the snow along the porch steps had melted into narrow channels that glistened in the pale sun. Elias watched them from his chair, a quilt over his knees. Rex lying close enough that his warmth reached the old man's legs. The dog's ears still lifted at every unfamiliar sound, but there was no tension in his body now, only watchfulness, born of care, not fear. Elias thought often about the night of the storm, not with bitterness, but with clarity. He had spent years believing his time had already passed, that his role in the world was finished. The attack had shaken him, yes, but what followed had awakened something he hadn't felt since returning from war, the knowledge that his life still mattered to others. Daniel settled into his new assignment with quiet determination. Policing a rural county was different, slower, more personal. People waved when they saw his cruiser. They asked after his father. They brought treats for Rex. Daniel found himself smiling more, sleeping better, carrying less of the weight he hadn't realized he'd been dragging behind him for years. On clear mornings, Daniel and Elias walked the tree line together, Rex trotting ahead, stopping now and then to look back, as if counting them. Elias moved slowly, leaning on a carved walking stick Daniel had found in the shed, but he insisted on going farther. Each day, "You don't stop moving," Elias said once, breath clouding the air, "or the cold settles in for good." Daniel nodded. "Guess that applies to more than just winter." One afternoon, a local school teacher brought her class up the mountain. The children stood in a loose line, boots sinking into the snow, eyes wide, as Elias told them about service, about standing your ground without hatred, about how courage sometimes looks like asking for help, and sometimes like offering it. When they left, one little girl turned back and waved at Rex. "You're a good boy," she said solemnly. Rex wagged his tail once, dignified as ever. As spring crept closer, Elias planted seedlings near his wife's grave, and steady despite the ache in his joints. Daniel stood nearby, silent, respectful. They didn't need many words anymore. The important ones had already been said. On the anniversary of the storm, snow fell again, light this time, almost gentle. Elias stepped onto the porch, closed his eyes, and let it land on his face. He wasn't afraid of the cold anymore. Inside, a framed photograph sat on the mantel. An old soldier, a modern officer, and a loyal dog, standing together in front of a cabin that had weathered every storm thrown its way. Some legacies aren't written in history books. They're written in how we protect one another, especially when the world turns cold.